Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
Well, Bitcoin, is it a fad? Is it the future? Or is it just a cool place to put your fiat currency until you figure out what's going to happen to the dollar? Well, we don't know, but maybe Joe Deaux does from thestreet.com. Joe, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So Bitcoin, it was up over 1,000. I think it hit 1,200 at one point. Then the Chinese said, we don't want any part of it. And then the main Bitcoin exchange, Mt. Gox, under a major denial of service attack, they suspend all redemptions or exchanges, and then it kind of sinks after that. Now they're coming back. They're saying, okay, we'll be back in business shortly. What's your take on the whole Bitcoin phenomena, Joe?
I think when you and I kind of discuss Bitcoin on this, that's almost like a day-to-day type of discussion, right? The way that you'll hear people say the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up, 100 points on Thursday, but then it was down 100 points on Friday. I think those kind of discussions are far more familiar to the average American, what the equities are doing. But I think when you start talking about the price of Bitcoin in November of $1,000 or more, then what happened with, China cracking down, and then discussing that, the Mt. Gox and Bitstamp exchanges were going offline, I think you get into a space that most people are probably very unfamiliar with. And it's sometimes better to explain, at least in such a new asset, if it is an asset, if some people consider it an asset, or currency. I think it's easier to just say that right now what we're seeing with Bitcoin is what everybody said already, which is that it is an incredibly volatile cryptocurrency or digital currency that if you want to get into Bitcoin, you have to have quite a bit of risk appetite and a pretty steady stomach for what you will have to deal with for quite a long time.
Yeah, and basically, unless you're some kind of computer whiz kid, you're basically not going to understand what the heck the stuff is, really, are you? Other than you either have it or you don't.
If you want to get into mining Bitcoin and understanding that the miners keep the system in order, that's certainly a different world. You're getting into logarithms, you're getting to high-powered computing, but if you're just looking at Bitcoin in terms of price fluctuations and how when you get in terms of trying to make a profit or whatever, they are definitely two very different worlds. You can have the guys who don't really know anything about Bitcoin in terms of, what's going on behind the scenes, but you can also have the guys who just get in for the market fluctuations.
Yep. Interestingly, though, more and more companies, online companies, are accepting Bitcoin. I think Amazon is accepting it as a form of payment now?
I don't know about Amazon, but I do know that a number of places are implementing it. As a sort of trial run, I'm not sure if it's so much because they actually think that it's the future of digital transactions, or if they see it as a way to kind of catch on at a time when Bitcoin is becoming more popular. So I do know that there are other outlets who have basically said, no, we're not going to venture into that world right now. But some others feel like, hey, why not? It's something new. It's completely digital. There is no transaction fee, and so we'll give it a shot.
Yeah, you get rid of all the merchant clearing account nonsense that costs you like 3% to clear a transaction that goes to your favorite too big to fail bank, right? And 3% in this day and age is really a lot of, it could be the difference between success and failure, right?
It adds up. It adds up for the banks, and of course it adds up for the stores as well. This is why if you go anywhere in New York City, like a bodega, like just a general store on the corner of the street, most of the time you go in, they say, it will accept your credit card if you buy $10 or more worth of food. And I don't think this is unusual in a lot of places around the country. And the main reason is because they feel like they're actually losing money if they take your credit card transaction for something, say you buy a Coca-Cola for $1.50 or you buy a sandwich for $4. You know, they're already taking a charge on top of that for simply taking the swipe and sending it back to the credit card company.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember the day when, you know, virtually no places really, retail establishments like McDonald's, like the gas station, none of them took credit cards way back when. And then all of a sudden, every place took credit cards.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be pretty difficult, right? You had that big machine that you'd put the credit card, you'd stamp it in, and they'd, you know, do the cha-ching, you know, put the whatever it was, you know, the little metal slider to get the imprint of your card.
The knuckle busters. They called them
right,
knuckle busters.
The knuckle busters, right? Exactly. I mean, I remember 2 years ago, I ran into one. It was a cab down in South Carolina, and I thought, wow, I didn't think these things existed anymore. So we made it a little bit easier to swipe the card as well.
Yeah, now it's all electronic, and it's its own form of currency almost, but it comes with a price. And you know, you go to certain establishments, especially in Westchester County, and you bring out the Amex card, and they say, no, they charge too big a discount. We don't want them. Give us a MasterCard or a Visa. In fact, you go to places overseas, they don't really want the high discount cards either. And sometimes they'll only take debit cards. So
right. Yeah, this is really the space that if we're talking about people in the finance world are focusing on with Bitcoin, I think it is if Bitcoin really catches on, or if it hangs around for a little while, well, let's just assume that might happen. The question I think a lot of people on Wall Street are asking is, how does this affect those credit card companies, the Visas, the MasterCards, even Western Union, right? It does seem like a very fair question that a lot of people are looking at. I've said it a few times to people that a couple weeks ago or last week, I had the former U.S. Mint Director, Ed Moy. He was the Mint Director under George W. Bush in the 2000s. And he said he's actually been writing a little bit about Bitcoin, not so much as a currency, but as a platform for transactions. And he does think that it is something that these credit card companies and some of these other money transaction wire companies will have to keep an eye on. He didn't say, hey, that Bitcoin will overtake all of these companies. Not at all. But he said it is worth looking into whether or not there's something more that we haven't yet realized with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, as it currently sits, may not be the same Bitcoin in 5 or 10 years if it's around for that long.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to. You just don't know how this thing is going to evolve. And if you see merchants with dollar signs in their eyes, because look, a company, a retail establishment, let's say they do $3 million a year in credit card sales, and then they see Bitcoin eliminating the prospect of that, 3% of 3 million, that's $100,000 in profit a store can realize just by taking Bitcoin. And if the public comes to accept Bitcoin the same way the stores do, and he can get rid of a third of that, that's a lot of money for a small businessman to realize just by accepting Bitcoin. So the banks are not going to be too happy with that, are they?
You would think not. Although I think to say that they're worried about it right now would probably wouldn't be the case. I think there's still so many unknowns, and this does go back to the survey that we did last month. We teamed up with GFK and found that interviewing more than 1,000 people in the country, we asked them simply, do you know what Bitcoin is, or have you ever heard of it? And 75% of them, 3 in every 4 persons, said, no, we don't know what this is. And that that doesn't suggest that it will be the case going forward, right? It doesn't mean that a year from now or 2 years from now that 3 out of every 4 people still won't be familiar with what Bitcoin is. But it does suggest that if you're looking for some sudden change, some sharp turnover, that suddenly the banks have to start worrying about Bitcoin competing or eating into the profits that they make on fees, it's probably the wrong thing to be talking about, at least at this point.
Yeah, at this point. But you know how things can catch on very quickly in societal trends, and that's the key here is how long will it take, right? How long would it take, and what would it take for it to catch on?
How long could it take, and will it, if it does, how long will it take, and also will it be Bitcoin? There are other digital currencies out there. I'm not saying that any of them are as well known as Bitcoin, but is Bitcoin the one that if the market, so people choose that a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is something that they would like to use regularly, is it Bitcoin that will be the one that ends up winning out as the number one cryptocurrency for use? I don't know, but it's certainly one that's happening in circles of people who are far more familiar with the Bitcoin digital currency world than most of us are.
Hey, and don't forget, you got the privacy aspects of it as well. Real hard for the government and others to track who has it and who's using it, and that's definitely a lure for a certain segment of the population as well, right?
Right. It's interesting when you do talk to the Bitcoin supporters, the crowd of Bitcoin supporters who are kind of on board and really behind the day-to-day of what's happening in the Bitcoin world. You do meet, so there's the ones that you meet who are talking about the things that you and I have talked about thus far. Okay, what if is it used for transaction, how to use it for fees and whatnot? And then, of course, there's the other crowd, which is it a currency to be anonymous? And, some of them go as far as to say is, subvert the government and not be using a currency that is backed by the full faith and credit of a federal government. I think that, that's certainly an argument for a lot of people as to why they would want to use it. But as Bitcoin grows in popularity, the legitimacy of the currency probably would benefit more from the discussion that isn't so much talking about it as, oh, well, this is how we'll subvert, using it as a currency that the government can't track, and more as something that's more legitimately traded, one on an open market, and it would encourage not only retail users but institutional as well.
Yeah, I think you're right on that score. As it becomes mainstream, those anti-establishment types probably will become less of a factor in its overall acceptance and success. And its economics will really be the appeal, right?
Right. I think that's right. I think the appeal, at least in smaller circles that are obviously not a part of the Bitcoin movement, but are, in the financial world, or like you said, the small businesses, the appeal to them hasn't been so much, well, let's subvert the government, right? It has been, hey, this is an interesting concept. There is a finite amount of Bitcoin that will be distributed, right? There's a point at which it will end. It acts in a way it's interesting how some of the Bitcoin supporters call it. It acts both as a currency and as a commodity at the same time. So you have to essentially dig it out of cyberspace the way you would dig commodities out of the ground, so to speak. But it also, in the eyes of many people who use it, is traded and used as a form of payment, so a currency.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting in that regard. Well, on that note, Joe, we find you at thestreet.com. One other question I had for you. The upcoming merger of Comcast and Time Warner. Any thoughts on that?
My colleague here who covers mergers and acquisitions, Antoine Guerre, he's at the Street as well, had an interesting piece that went up last week in which he discussed why the merger may not be such a bad thing for the shrinking cable industry. And he compared it to the mergers we've recently seen in telecommunications and in the airline industry as well. And the argument essentially is, and I should preface by saying I understand why a lot of people are against it, the idea that it's antitrust. And of course, the Justice Department will look at this, and they're going to determine whether or not it's okay. And, a lot of people worried, oh, well, is my cable bill going to go up and whatever? But this is an industry that has seen subscribers leave. The cord cutters that are going to streaming online video such as Hulu and Netflix. They don't feel like they need the cable. They're not so interested in sports, which means they really don't feel like they need cable. And so as the industry starts to shrink, if you have a merger of two large companies like this, Time Warner and Comcast, the argument goes that it will actually help improve the space. The way that we've seen airline industries merge in an industry that, again, is shrinking and having difficulty making profits, that this is something that could not only work out for subscribers, but it could possibly work out for investors as well. I mean, keep an eye on it. Of course, I'm not endorsing and saying that this is definitely the way it will be and that it's a perfect merger, but or acquisition, really. But it's a fair argument to consider.
Yeah, you might have a point, and it just somebody expressed to me, well, what about the net neutrality laws being struck down by that federal judge recently? And what if you can't get all your internet sites under one roof and they can pick and choose which ones they want to give you? And I just said, you're being ridiculous. Lower court decision.
Right. And I think Comcast has come out and said that they were not going to put blocks on, like sites such as Netflix in terms of its streaming. And so, if the company does stick by its guns on that one, I mean, that's positive for user experience.
Yeah, I think they were experimenting with throttling down certain sites in California that caused a major rebellion among customers. There are going to be choices among how you get your internet. You have them now. Right. And, just alienate the customers enough and they'll exercise those choices. Joe, thanks. So you find Joe, his work at thestreet.com. Link will be found in the show notes on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Don't forget, sign up for the newsletter. Joe, always a pleasure. Be well.
Thanks so much.
FSN, it's about what's next.
Hi, it's Kerry Lutz. I recently decided to move my retirement account into physical precious metals to hedge against the coming times. If you want to move an existing retirement account into physical precious metals that you can hold in your hand, tax-free, there's no company that can do it more quickly and efficiently than Regal Assets. It took them just 24 hours to open my new IRA account, and all I had to do was fill out one simple form. The best part is that Regal Assets does all the work for you. They cover the setup and administrative costs for 2013. If you're interested in making the same move I did, call 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620. That's 855-678-6620, or visit them at regalassets.com. You'll be glad you did, and tell them Kerry sent you.
Summer is almost over, and so far we've really lucked out. No hurricanes. And living in Florida here, I'm extremely grateful, but that could change tomorrow. And look, we're about to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of Superstorm Hurricane Sandy. Do you remember that one? Not very many people in the Mid-Atlantic or the New York area region were prepared for it. But if you had PrepareWise emergency preparedness food, you were ready. If you'd prepared with PrepareWise, water and the basics, some currency and a means of self-defense, you weren't caught off guard. And if you weren't prepared then, please learn from it and get prepared now with PrepareWise emergency preparedness food. It always pays to prepare. Go to preparewise.com, use the code Lutz. You'll get great savings. Depending on the size of your order, you're going to get a whole lot more. Be prepared. Don't be caught waiting for the government to come and save you. Preparewise.com. Use the code LUTZ, L-U-T-Z. Be prepared.
The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.